Welcome to the Christian Romance Podcast, where we go behind the books with inspiring Christian romance authors, exploring faith, love, and the journey that brings the story to life. I'm your host, Kelly Jo Wilson, and today we're chatting with Nicole Deese. Nicole is a Christy and Carol Award-winning best-selling author known for her hope-filled, heartfelt, and humor-infused contemporary romance novels. With a gift for blending emotional depth and faith-driven storytelling, her work has touched countless readers through stories of redemption, grace, and love. When she's not crafting unforgettable characters, Nicole enjoys soaking in audiobooks, chasing adventure, and finding inspiration in the everyday beauty of small-town life. She lives in Idaho with her husband and 3 amazing kids. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode so you can hear more about our newest book giveaway. Now, here's my conversation with Nicole. Hi, Nicole. I am so happy to have you on the Christian Romance Podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am so excited to talk with you. I can't even tell you. I know we were chatting a little bit beforehand, but I'm just so excited to hear your personal story, but then also about this wonderful new book that you have. Why don't you just start by letting our listeners know a little bit about you, like what got you into writing and, what that looked like, how God took you through that journey.
Yeah, I always say I didn't know necessarily that I was going to be a writer, or an author, but I have loved kind of the art of story since I was very, very young. And so my parents would always tell me stories of how I would, kind of put on these elaborate shows when I was, a kid, and then up into my teen years would love to just like tell stories and make people laugh, make people feel something. And so it kind of became known like even at family dinners and different events, like, oh, have Nicole tell it. She tells it better, kind of thing. And so I think that even from an early age that God just kind of had planted something in me to enjoy, story. My dad was a pastor growing up. And so he was very relational and personal in how he preached. And so I think maybe some of that influence, kind of rubbed off on me as well. But yeah, and then into my adult years, we had kind of moved locations uh, from both my husband and I kind of grew up at the same church, same community for most of our lives, and so when we moved states for to pursue kind of a job promotion for him, it was kind of in that season that I was reading a ton and thought. Actually, I remember the exact moment I had just finished a series, a series from the library, and I looked at my husband and said, I think I could do this. And he said, do what? And I said, I think I could write a book. And he's like, okay. And that was the charge, right? So like that was the moment. And so really from that point, I I wrote, my first 3 books and independently published them, and then the Lord, just kind of did some neat things and opened some doors after that, and that's kind of how the process began. It was just very organic, and I didn't know what I didn't know, which I actually think was a blessing in hindsight because I just really got to experience the love and joy of telling story and writing from the heart instead of trying to cram all the rules in that I later learned. But yes, that was kind of the journey.
That's beautiful. I love that you said like start, and writing from the heart because you absolutely do. You can tell that your
Yeah,
heart is you have such a tender heart for your readers and you can just feel it through every word that you choose. And it really
oh,
is
thank you.
wonderful. And I love that you started out independently and then
Yeah,
you never know. I mean, because God can take you on such a different path because
yeah,
independently publishing is kind of tough. You have to coordinate a team of people,
yeah,
book cover designers and editors, and
yeah,
it's not really self-publishing because it's very much a
yeah.
lot of people
It's a
involved in the
team.
project.
It's a team. Yeah, it's team
Yes.
publishing.
It's team
Yeah,
publishing. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, exactly. So it's, it's a lot. It really is.
yeah,
And it's very busy and it's a
yeah,
lot to do. So it is nice to have that option to always do that. But then also, like you said, if you have open doors for different publishing houses and such,
yeah,
um, to be able to do, publish in different ways, I think
yeah.
it's just beautiful and wonderful. And you do, I did want to ask you about So one of your books that, one of the prior books that you wrote a few years ago before I called you mine. Oh my gosh, this book is just gorgeous. Your books are amazing. This book, I just started reading it, which, oh my gosh, I should have read it so long ago. And I just think that it's just so beautiful. But there's a part, I mean, there's so much of your personal experience kind of
Mm.
infused into that book. So I was curious to know, like, how did that process look in, you choosing kind of the theme, like, and how that theme pressed on your heart, and how did that look whenever you were like kind of going through that and then putting it into the story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, really, I can kind of look back at the majority of my books, definitely before I called you mine, kind of started even a new precedence with this. But um, I think that writing for me has always been like an emotional expression of whatever season of life that I'm going through or that I'm in, whether it's, a spiritual season or, like adoption is, it's everything kind of thrown in a big mixer, right? It's emotional, spiritual, physical, mental, it's a lot in one. And so even I think from some of my early, like even from my very, very first self-published or, team published series, as we've called it now, that was really kind of going through a journey, a really deep spiritual journey that kind of this fictional story was kind of born out of. And the same with Lucy's adoption. I think that, in that season, it's too long to get into now, but in that season, I'd actually taken a break from writing. It really was to say for both my husband and I to kind of say yes and be in the same place. I really knew that the Lord was asking me to lay writing down for a season. And so I
Mm,
wasn't sure that season could have been indefinite. I really wasn't sure, but I knew that to focus on what was ahead with her and all that was going to be involved, that I just couldn't be on contract. I couldn't have that kind of even as a back burner option in my mind, that I really needed to just trust the Lord in the steps that He put right in front of us. And so it wasn't until after we got home from that, probably about 3 or 4 months after, that I really started to feel this stir in me. Like, I'd kind of come out of some deep exhaustion, right?
mm,
But also kind of going, gosh, there's still something in here. Like there's something in here that I need to explore and really put on page and laugh and kind of work out some of my own thoughts. I'm actually a verbal processor, but I think there's something with writing too that can really help us journey through our own feelings and really even kind of what I was asking the Lord about, in this time. And so I think that writing that story, it was so important to me. I didn't even realize how important it was going to be, because I didn't even know if I was writing to publish that novel or if I was just writing
mm.
kind of for my own, therapeutic purposes, really. But it was such a, because I wasn't on contract, there was no external stress at all for me to write that story. So I truly wrote out of joy. I wrote out of, kind of these stolen moments, where I could just kind of go in my office and shut everything else out for however long that looked, whether it was an hour or after everyone had gone to bed. But it was just such a beautiful time to kind of just recount God's favor in our own story of adoption. And that's truly what it was. Like, our story was a picture of God's faithfulness, to our daughter, to our marriage, and then hugely into my writing journey, because that book was eventually picked up, wanted by multiple publishers, and published through Bethany House, and which was, I could not have been more shocked about. Like, it was such a neat reminder of God's, hand and favor and faithfulness.
That's amazing. So he was guiding you during that process to lay writing down,
Yeah.
focus on the adoption with
Yeah.
Lucy, and
Hmm.
then wow. And then
Yeah.
whenever you're writing it, so very cathartic. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that you say you're a verbal processor too, because let me
Yeah.
tell you, so am I. I think
Yeah.
I never had a term for it though. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because yeah, do you talk like whenever you're processing things, you talk it out essentially,
Yep.
right? Like talk
Yep.
to God, talk it out.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, so he tells you to lay this down, go, preparing you for what's ahead, but then
Hmm.
writing the story, like you said, maybe to just document,
Yeah.
what he's doing with your story and
Yeah.
then put it into these characters in a certain way. And then before, so that book was initially, you weren't even sure, and then you independently published it and then, or team
No,
published it. Or
no,
no,
that
how did
before I
that
called you
work?
mine, no, I had actually written the whole book. I think I was about
Oh,
95% of the way through, and then I got a call from my agent, and she said, "Hey, so you won't believe this, but I got a call from these two publishing houses. They want to meet you. They want to ask what you're doing." And I had been out, like I had been completely out, probably for about 9 months at that point, kind of away from all writing everything. And she said, "Where are you at? In that book you started?" And I said, "Well, I'm just about finished with it." And she's like, "Well, do you want to pitch that?" I was like, I don't even know. And I was told, by multiple people, like, no one would want a book about that features international adoption, like a romance, blah, blah, all these things. And so I'm like, I don't even know, and then I sat down. My husband was like, "Yep." Like, so he flew me out to this conference where these two editors from different houses were going to be. And so one took me to lunch and one took me to dinner. And I told what I was doing. And it was so neat because I didn't have like, I didn't have even this like expectation. It was just kind of like here, like I wasn't forming a story. I'd written a story, so
yeah, yeah.
it was like, here's what I have, like, here's what I've done, here's why I've done it, here's, why I wrote it. And they were both like, absolutely, yes, like we want this. And it was kind of this moment of like, you do, so yeah, it was, and really like the neat part of that whole story. So the day I had been waiting on a contract for a different publisher for a long time. This is like prior to saying yes to Lucy. We had not seen her face. We were kind of just in the process of putting paperwork in, writing a million essays, like doing our part to just say, yes, we're willing to go this route if God opens the door for adoption. But that journey can take a really, really long time. So we were kind of just in the very beginning stages of that. And I'd been waiting for months to hear back from a different publisher that I had been writing with, and hadn't heard anything, didn't have any news of a new contract. And so I'm not kidding when I say that the morning that we got Lucy's email with her entire, kind of like her entire file of her life, that morning we had never even seen a picture of, like, we'd never seen pictures or videos or anything. Um, we opened up that file from our adoption agency, and we just kind of looked at each other like, it wasn't like we were like, "Oh my goodness, this is exactly what we thought it would be," but it was like we both felt a peace to say yes, right? Like we both felt a
Mm.
peace to say yes to the next step. We felt no red flags. There was no, like, we both kind of looked at each other like, why wouldn't we do, like, why wouldn't we keep going, And so we had just written back to the agency, like, yes, like whatever the next step is, we're in. About 1 hour later, I hear from my literary agent that she just got a call from this other publisher and they wanted a 2-book contract. And it was that moment that I knew 100%. And I just started crying on the phone and I said,
Mm.
I just saw the face of my daughter. And she said, "Okay, then it sounds like you need to take a break." And I said, "It does. Yeah." And so I really just could not reconcile how, like, for a really long season, I couldn't reconcile how God would bring me to a place of, opening so many doors in this writing journey that I didn't ask for, that I wasn't pushing to, that I wasn't pushing for, but he just kept allowing opportunities, right? So it was like I couldn't reconcile how on one hand he could be opening the doors to say yes to the publishing world and say yes to adoption, which is why I was so delayed in saying yes to the process of adoption, right? It was actually my
Mm.
husband that had said yes first. And so it was like when that happened, I had already processed so much of that. And I knew that God had already said, like, if it's a yes for her, then this needs to get laid down, right? So then to be a year plus later, sitting at these meetings and having this manuscript about adoption from our adoption and having multiple publishing houses want it, it was a testament of God's faithfulness again in my journey, in her story. And just to say, like, and that's really the whole point, the whole premise and kind of major conflict in Before I Called You Mine is, how can God open one door when it means closing the other? And that was the heart of that whole novel, is to say, we don't get it. Like, so often, like, we don't have the luxury of being outside of time, the way that God is, and yet his heart is always just for us to say yes to that first step and to trust. And that was really truly the story of Before I Called You Mine, was laying down everything that I knew, saying yes to him, saying yes to his ask of us in adoption, and then letting him rewrite how the next half of my writing career was going to look.
Oh my gosh, Nicole, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's just such a wonderful story, and it's just a
Yeah.
wonderful like testament and testimony to how, first of all, it's extremely vulnerable to put yourself out there, to even write this story about kind of what you're going through, and it's just vulnerable to share anyway. So I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to you for sharing that. But it's very encouraging because it's so crazy. He is just full of surprises. Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus is the king of plot twists.
He
Okay.
is. Yes, he
And
is.
here he is. He's like, you're going to have to lay this down. And so you're like
Hmm.
laying it down. It's been months. And then an hour after you were like saying yes, I love that you had this piece about you. I know exactly what, like, it's like Holy Spirit just is with you, and you have this peace, you and your husband. Oh,
Yeah.
praise Jesus. I
Yeah.
love that so much. And now you have this beautiful daughter who's
Yeah.
learning to drive now. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
I know.
Um, but it's amazing. And then an hour later, he's like offering you, he's like, okay, you said yes. Here's my yes,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Right.
here, you take this, and here's
Yeah.
abundance. And it's just
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And you've impacted so many people with these
Wow. Thanks.
stories, or you've allowed him also, because, that's the
Mm.
beautiful thing about Christian fiction and writing Christian romance and fiction. It's very much co-creating with him. So you're
Yeah.
allowing, you have this fellowship with him, and just impacting so many people with this beautiful story. And it's so funny to me when you look in hindsight, right? When you're like, nobody wants, you hear nobody wants
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
international adoption story. Meanwhile, you're like, now it's like, no, a lot of
Yeah.
people want it. A lot of people want it. It's a beautiful story. Of course
Oh,
they would
thank
want it.
you. Thank you.
Ah, so crazy. I'm so happy for you. And I love that you guys had, it can be such a long process. A couple friends
Hmm.
of ours were trying to adopt for years and years. And I'll never forget the night I was actually working a night shift as a nurse, and I saw her post on Facebook, and they were going to pick up their daughter. Very kind of quick. It was kind of abrupt the way that it happened, but they had already gone through the process. And I was like bawling of in the
Yeah.
middle of
It's
like the
beautiful.
nursing station, because it's such they're just wonderful people, which I'm sure, like you and your husband, you just want to do this amazing thing. You have this on your heart. You have a wonderful family. You want to open your family up. And it can be so grueling. It really
Mm.
can. It can put a lot of stress and strain and questioning, and
Mm.
to just see it like come to fruition is amazing. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
I
Thank
really am.
you. Thank you.
Yes. It's beautiful. Beautiful story. I love it. So let's get to your book now, that you're this new book out, The Voice We Find, which is part of the Fog Harbor romance series. So why don't you talk a little bit about, before getting into The Voice We Find, why don't you say a little bit, because this is book 3 in the series.
Yeah.
So just tell our listeners a little bit about the series, maybe a little snippet about the first couple books.
Yeah. So, Fog Harbor Romance series was kind of just birthed out of wanting to wanting to kind of get into the reader's world a little bit, and so I kind of came up with this idea of what would it look like to have a fictional publishing house based in San Francisco, and what if I kind of loosely had main characters of all three novels kind of loosely connected to this house, and loosely connected to each other. So each book can be read totally as a standalone, but there is one minor character that kind of goes through all three. And then there's the publishing house that is called Fog Harbor, Fog Harbor Books, is in there. And so kind of every story is connected that way. But yeah, so in Fog Harbor Romance, I would say that it's also kind of comes from a personal place. Each story has kind of touched on something in my personal life, or in the case of The Voice We Find, I really drew from an experience that my friend was going through and kind of helped draft this novel. But the first two, the first one is called The Words We Lost. And that story is based on a grief journey that happens to the main senior editor of this publishing house. She's just lost her best friend the year before, who also is one of the top producing authors in Fog Harbor Books. And so there's this missing manuscript that the author had written that was never turned in, and so kind of finishing out a series that has very popular, and so she's kind of on the look for that. And then of course, she gets a surprise visitor from someone else in her world who knew this author very well. And it's in that kind of visit, I don't want to say too much, but it's in that visit that information surfaces that brings this editor to kind of where this place that she had grown up, with this author when they were young. And this hero of the story, Joel, is the cousin to this author, and they kind of have to work together to try and figure out several mysteries, more than just the finding of the manuscript, but also why it was kept the way that it was kept, and some secrets along the way. So kind of revisiting a place of grief, and really looking at kind of from a broad perspective how grief impacts so many people so differently, how it can be the same person that's loved by so many different people in the town, different family members, different friends, and yet grief has a different response and a different face, kind of throughout the novel. So it's kind of an overarch to that. And that comes from, I lost my sister 11 years ago in a car wreck. And so that story is the first time I've kind of dove into grief in that way, and kind of allowed myself to go to that place. And it was absolutely the Lord's timing. And again, so healing for me. Toward the end of the story, it was just very obvious that the Lord worked with me, to kind of write that book. And yeah, and it's one of my very favorite romances. It has very deep themes, and those are the kind of books that I like to read, and so those are the kind of books I like to write. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry about your sister, Nicole.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh, it's such a hole. It's weird. I lost my sister 20 years ago, actually,
Mm,
to this year.
mm.
And oh my gosh.
Same
Yeah, it
here. Yeah.
does. There's just a part of you, and especially with a sibling,
Yeah.
it's just different, especially when you're close,
Yeah.
and you just learn to live with the hole in your heart.
Yeah.
I feel like is like the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm sorry. I love that
Yeah.
you were able to write this story, and then you were finally, because sometimes, yeah, it seems like it's a little bit easier to bind it up at
Yeah.
first and not really kind
Oh
of let it
yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. Some subjects are harder to touch, on page, I think, because you do have to go so deep as a writer. And so
Hmm.
I wasn't quite ready, to do that until this story came. And yeah, and then the second book is a totally different type of um, premise. It's a road trip that happens on a tour bus with a family of women who have all kind of been connected into the music world, and then a bus driver who is there under a little bit of false pretenses, who takes them on this trip cross country. And but there's a mystery. There's a lot of uncovering, kind of who is writing a secret tell-all book about this family, and so there's kind of a mystery throughout there, but a fun or super fun like forced proximity romance, which I love those so much. I write a lot of forced proximity moments. I do love those. I think like let's just put them in a pressure cooker. So there's that one, and that deals a little bit with grief, but not as much as the first. And again, at least they're all happy endings, so that's what we guarantee in the romance world. Yeah, yeah, and then
Oh, that sounds fun.
yeah, yeah,
I love it. I love forced proximity too.
me too.
Especially that sounds like there's going to be some drama. Especially
Yeah,
on the road trip, and then there's like a little
yep,
mystery element involved,
yeah.
and it's like who's writing this? Is it somebody in family? Is it somebody outside the family? Yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you put three sisters and a mom on a bus with one male, you're going to have a lot of drama. So there is quite a bit of drama.
I already
Yeah,
have sympathy for I already like him
yeah,
to
yeah,
just
yeah.
be able to
It
handle it.
doesn't take it doesn't take much to feel some real good, sympathy for him. He's a pretty funny character. So yeah, so that's the second one, and then yeah, Voice We Find. I keep looking down because I have it down here. Um, Voice We Find is really a tale about what it looks like to be kind of both my hero and my heroine are kind of coming out of brokenness. One,
Mm,
my hero is kind of living a really tough journey that was assigned to him, nothing that he chose. He's become the guardian of his older sister. They've lost their parents kind of before the book opens, and there's just a lot of stuff going on that he didn't choose, and so he's constantly battling, am I enough, for this task? And some really big questions that he's been asking God to kind of not have any answers of, so he's kind of feeling pretty low in his faith journey, and has a lot of anger toward himself for some things that happened along the way. And then my heroine has fallen on some hard times. She's kind of fallen from grace in the Broadway world. She's been on stage and a singer and actress, and she has to kind of come home to a pretty toxic environment at in her family that she left quite a while before. And so she's also kind of stuck in difficult circumstances, and she doesn't know the Lord yet, but finds the Lord in the process of this story. And so I
mm.
really wanted to highlight how amazing it is to see somebody that is newly walking with Jesus, and the testimony that they can have, on someone who knows all the things that grew up in the Word, grew up in church, grew up, knowing Scripture, grew up having, quote unquote, Christian parents, and still be in a hard place, and just how so these two kind of come together. They have to work on a project together in the audiobook world, and it's really through that, again, some great forced proximity going on in this world, but really where one they really get to both kind of bring each other up kind of out of this brokenness, through shared experience, but also through kind of some new understandings of really how God operates, in our lives, in the midst of hard times. And so um, I had a friend, a really close friend, in this journey of writing, who was dealing with a prodigal son at the time, and
Mm.
really to the point of knowing that her only role was to pray fervently every single day for this child, and that she had no more control, that there was no communication. And so I drew so much from just kind of her strength and her faith and her hard moments. We talked every single day and prayed for this child, and now he's actually home and doing really amazing and walking with the
Oh,
Lord. But there was a season where it was like, all I can do is just let God have him. And so I really think that part of the journey of this book was, and I dedicate it to people that are praying for prodigals. Um,
mm.
but is really that journey for my hero is what brings him back, to God's heart, what brings him back, um, and allows him to kind of let go of all of this baggage that he's been holding on to for so long. So yeah,
Mm, that sounds amazing. Oh my gosh. Praise Jesus that her son
yeah,
is home.
yeah,
My goodness.
yeah,
That is such a helpless
yeah,
feeling, but there is so much power in prayer. There
yeah,
really is,
yeah,
because I feel like our greatest power that we have is when we're on our knees.
yeah,
That is when we surrender and we say, Jesus, take the wheel,
yeah,
because I trust you and your will, not mine. Just
yeah,
even like how Jesus was praying before he was crucified.
yeah,
Your Father, your will, not
yeah,
mine, be done.
yeah,
That's like the greatest power that we have, is just
yeah.
surrendering.
That's right.
And but to us, right, in our flesh, it's like, I don't know, what's going to happen. We doubt, and,
Yeah,
we struggle with that in the
yeah,
flesh. And it's hard because it can't seem like such a helpless moment, especially, mom worrying about the son. So, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for your friend. And
yeah,
God bless you for being there with her, because
yeah,
man, that is just so hard.
yeah.
But
We need
Jesus
community,
works miracles.
we
Yeah,
need
we need,
community. We
yes.
have to have that connection. We are the hands
Yes.
and feet of Christ, to our neighbors, to our friends. I mean, I truly believe that is, um, that's how the church works. We are the church, we are the church. It's not just something we go to on Sunday morning, but it's how we're living it out, with our community.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I used to always say about like witnessing, that's always hit me on like witnessing in your character, especially like I can tell you as
Yeah.
a nurse at the bedside, sometimes people are at their absolute worst. They're going through such hard times. They are from all different backgrounds, all different religions, all different everything. And you
Right.
can't always talk so open about Jesus, but you can
Hmm.
certainly witness in your character and show the love that he
Yeah. That's
gives to
good.
you, right?
Hmm.
And I just, would always try to do that because it's so important. Like you said,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the community. We are the church for sure. My goodness, your characters sound amazing. I love the contrast of somebody who knows like the prodigal
The
son
truth.
kind,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
knows Jesus, knows
Yeah.
that, knows scripture, and walks away, versus someone who doesn't really know and
Yeah.
comes to it. Because
Yeah.
I feel like that it really can just resonate so much, because at some point in all of our lives, we're all sinners, right? We
Yeah.
all have doubting moments. We all have tough moments where we're like, oh my gosh, I know I personally have struggled with that so much, about
Mm.
not ever being enough, and I'm not worthy of Jesus. There's no point, and all of that. But it's really not that's all lies. We
Hmm.
aren't worthy, but he is. And that's
Hmm.
what it's about,
That's
because
right.
he is.
Yeah.
So I love those stories. Oh my gosh, Nicole, I love it. I
Hmm.
love it. Sounds amazing. It sounds absolutely amazing. And I love the names too, Sophie and August.
Yeah.
Also, I was reading the little blurb too, and oh my gosh, does she have a geriatric cat?
Yeah. Yeah. She does.
What
Named
is the cat's name?
named Phantom. Yeah, he's all black and has a little white patch on his eye, and he's blind in that eye. But he is quite the character, and he for sure plays a role in this story.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, he's
That's
he's pretty funny.
that's hilarious. I know. I love whenever animals are in there. I feel like they can have such like a humor, that can have a little bit of a humor element
Yeah,
to it, especially
especially when
cats.
you're dealing with kind of, a few heavier themes, like it's great to throw in an
Mhm.
element that's just there for the fun of being there. So,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Oh my gosh, Phantom. That's hilarious. I love it. Especially if she's on Broadway. His
Yep.
name's Phantom. It's
Yep.
so it's so
Yep.
appropriate.
Yep.
Oh, it's wonderful. So one more thing, just kind of staying on the book. So August, your hero,
Hmm.
is now he takes this guardianship of his sister. Now his sister is hard of hearing.
Yes.
So what did that kind of look like whenever you were developing kind of that piece? Was that tough? Did you
Yeah.
experience anything like that in your personal life, or were you
No,
how did you kind of develop that?
So yeah, so Gabby, she kind of has an interesting third POV through this story
Oh.
that's told kind of in a unique way through some voice memos. And so she wasn't hard of hearing. She was involved in an accident right
Mm.
right before August took guardianship, and um, that's what actually damaged her both ears, cut the cochlear nerve and I think it's her right ear, and then just has left her profoundly deaf in her other one, in her right ear. And so she has hearing aids at the start, but that her condition is degenerative. And so it was a lot of research and like a lot of research, a lot of conversations, a lot of watching. I probably watched, I don't even know, 25 to 30 different interviews of people just sharing their experiences.
Mm.
But I think the big thing was, while I don't have any personal history of that or in my immediate family, um, we have a really incredible deaf and hard of hearing ministry at our church, and I've always
Mm.
been so um, just admiring of the interpreters and of just that kind of section of our church and kind of what they're doing and building small groups. And so I just wanted to know more. And so, kind of through that process, learning about how there's such a high percentage of deaf and hard of hearing people who have never even heard the gospel, that it's somewhere
Mm.
upwards of, I want to say it's in the 90 percentile. It's very high. I have the actual number quoted in my book. Um, but it's so high. And so that was like such a pull and a draw on my heart to kind of delve a bit deeper into that world and really see the need for interpreters, see the need for trying to bridge the gap between these two worlds. And, if there's not people that know, sign, to share, God's love that way, it's so, like, how will they know, And so I really wanted to show, even though Gabby has a hearing aid, she obviously is very verbal because she, wasn't hard of hearing before the accident. So she has kind of a unique case. I wanted to show kind of a broader picture of that world, and also an intimate picture of that world. And so I hope I did it justice. I tried my very best. It is complicated. It is difficult. There's tons of complexities involved, and every person's experience is different and individual. And so, at the end of the day, all I could do is my best with that storyline. But that was really what it was birthed out of, was just this admiring that ministry as a whole, but then also seeing just the deep need, for, how do we get Jesus, into this pocket, that so many people don't know about.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. I love that you're highlighting that too, because it's so, first of all, it's wonderful that you have that kind of ministry at your church. I think that
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
just beautiful. And then knowing and learning, that's a pretty jarring number. I mean, that's amazing.
yeah,
That's like crazy. So I love that you put a point of view of the sister too. So you can have people like actually get in her skin a little bit
yeah,
and really experience it. I feel like that'll bring so much awareness for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
That's wonderful that you're doing that. But that's really sad to think of that.
yeah, yeah.
How many people?
It's
Yeah,
startling,
that's
I
it
just remember
is.
reading that and feeling, so alarmed by the statistic that, upwards of 90% have never been told the gospel in a language that they, is their language. That's,
Mm.
yeah,
My goodness. So do you well, at your church, did they sign the service
yeah,
too? Is that how
yeah.
the
All of
ministry works?
the
Oh, that's
Yeah, song service and then all of the sermons. Yeah. So we have three services at our church, and so it's a dedicated, I believe it's second service that has, the ministry for deaf and hard of hearing. And yeah, it's really it's really so well organized and so well run that we have interpreters that have such a strong heart for Jesus, and for people. So I was able to talk and ask questions and then watch them, every Sunday and just think, gosh, it's just such a neat ministry and just a profound, ministry for the kingdom.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, I mean, just, being in the medical field, when people are hard of hearing, it's very common.
Yeah.
And especially, older people get hard of hearing. And
Right.
when you're teaching, like everything is so fast paced, like everything in the world is so fast, right? Especially
Yeah.
in the hospital, they're trying to teach you all this stuff and you have to know all this stuff right away. And you're never retaining any of it because you're sick and in pain and you want to go home.
Yeah.
So it's just not ideal conditions. But whenever people are hard of hearing and they can't say back, like either do like the teach back or things like that, sometimes they can be misdiagnosed, or sometimes they can be thought of as having some kind of like a
Mm.
mental block or some other issue, when in reality they're hard of hearing and they can't hear you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and they can't say it back, so you have to use other ways to try to teach, like help, them to understand it in their own way. Um,
Mm.
so it's just so important to recognize that, because
Hmm.
a lot of people struggle with that. So I
Yeah.
love that your church is recognizing it with one of the most important things that we should be teaching, and that's the gospel, right? That's of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So mm,
Yeah.
wonderful. And I love that you're highlighting it too in the book. How amazing is that? We are almost at time. So I did want to ask you, so throughout your journey, you have such a journey of just faith and this obedience and this wonderful way of bringing this brokenness and infusing it to, show how there is just so much love blooming out of the brokenness. Was there any
Mm.
verse that really kind of resonated with you as like an anchor verse, even for you, or even just tied that you kind of led you through this book, The Voice We Find?
Yeah. There's actually an anchor verse in Romans. I will turn to it. Um, I added it right after my dedication. It's Romans
Mm.
8:38-39. And it says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angel nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." And it's a pretty key verse that runs throughout and has kind of a real critical moment toward the end of the story. And it's one of my very favorite personal verses. But yeah, that was the anchor that kind of started out the story and really finishes it.
I love that verse. I absolutely love those verses. I can totally see how just knowing just a little snippet of the story that we've talked about, it absolutely seems super fitting with how God's love carries us through no matter what, especially, in the kind of a prodigal son situation. And then
Yeah.
even through bringing them together with her not really knowing. And Gabby's situation too, she's obvious. I mean, just there's so many good nuggets in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, it sounds absolutely amazing, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just thank you so much for what you do. Your stories, like I said, they just infuse so much, just beautifully weave the brokenness, but the light that can come through the darkness. And I think that
Mm,
many people are going to be impacted by this story as they are impacted by your other stories that you write, because you just put such a heart in it.
thank you.
And just thank you so much for being here today and just sharing your heart with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to meet you.
If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to hit subscribe and tap the bell to get notified of new episodes. We love blessing our listeners with exclusive interviews and, of course, amazing books. Each month, we host a themed book giveaway where you can win a selection of Christian romance novels and a few extra goodies, too. This month's theme is Royally in Love. We're giving away 5 swoon-worthy Christian romance books featuring crowns, courage, and Christ-centered love. From modern-day kingdoms to fantasy realms, these stories will sweep you off your feet in the best kind of fairy tale way. Whether you're listening as the episode drops or catching up later, no worries. You'll always find the link to the current giveaway on our website, christianromancepodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, keep your faith, share the love, and happy reading.